They made Snails likable? They made Snails likable. Without changing any aspect of his established personality, the MLP staff finally made Snails a genuinely enjoyable character. That was certainly unexpected. For years, Snails has been a dim witted doofus who's gone from just being okay to borderline annoying whenever he stepped into the spotlight. After all, I know that more than a few people were enjoying Trixie's punishment on Snips and Snails, perhaps a little too much for just that reason. And now, he's actually a welcomed addition to an episode, with more than a few chuckle-worthy moments to go with it. Bravo to the MLP staff for finally figuring out how to use this character effectively. To the point where, I can't believe I'm actually saying this, I now want to see more of Snails. Putting aside everything else from this episode for just a moment, this one element is quite an accomplishment. So, again, kudos. The story begins with Applejack and Rainbow Dash explaining the ins and outs of Buckball to Pinkie Pie and Fluttershy. And while I've never been the kind of person who gets excited about sporting events, this setup is actually pretty interesting. Like, the rules are easy to understand, and yet the game itself would be quite difficult to master. Dare I say, even fun to watch. I was really looking forward to seeing the match play out. Unfortunately, the episode barely gives enough time for the ending game to be in the spotlight. They don't even arrive at Appaloosa until there's only a couple minutes left of the story. And yeah, it was a little disappointing that they introduced this very intriguing concept for a sport which fits so nicely in the world of Equestria and seems like it would be fun to watch, and yet they spend the majority of the running time on a conflict we've seen dozens, if not hundreds of times before in other media. This is a lot like parents expecting way too much from their kids on a Little League team and then being surprised when their children don't really want to play anymore. It's covering a lot of the same beats from countless other stories that have come before it. With that said, I was still enjoying myself for the majority of the episode. Even though we're going through a lot of cliches we've seen before, the characters still have more than a few funny interactions to keep the audience invested, along with a ton of entertaining reactions. I know the MLP staff are probably looking for just another excuse to have Fluttershy go overboard with her anger, but the way they animate her expressions is just so much fun to watch. And I have to give special mention to both Ashley Ball and Andrea Libman here. It's really impressive watching these characters going back and forth with each other when you have to keep reminding yourself that it's really a voice actress getting into a conversation with herself. More than any other episode before, this is probably the most we've gotten to see both Ashley and Andrea playing off both their own and each other's characters, which again is a real treat. But as much as the interactions are entertaining, it's still part of a story which we've all become very familiar with by now. At first, I was worried they might be going with the conflict of Applejack and Rainbow Dash learning to admit they weren't the best choices for the team, and I was thoroughly relieved when the writers removed that possibility very early on. But then it was replaced with yet another widely used conflict of taking the fun out of the game by expecting too much from the players, which was mostly boring and predictable. I say mostly because how they presented the lesson itself was actually pretty clever. It was easy to see that Applejack and Rainbow Dash just had to focus on making the game fun again, but including Snails on the team actually played more of a purpose than just for comedy. Because he was the only one who had the proper mindset right from the start. Who would have thought that in an episode which focuses on two-thirds of the main six, that Snails would be both the most entertaining and the most thought-provoking for the point of the lesson itself? That concept alone just blows my mind. So overall, I think Buckball season makes for another good entry to the series on the whole. Cliché? Certainly. Predictable? For the most part. Entertaining? Most definitely. For taking a character which seems so bland and making him likable? That alone makes the episode worth a watch. Adding in an intriguing new concept for a pony sports game? Along with that kart racing idea from a few episodes back, I really hope the fans or perhaps Hasbro themselves will start thinking about creating a few video games based on these concepts. We'll just have to wait and see. In the meantime, though, I would like to hear your thoughts. What are your impressions on this new concept of Buckball? How did you react to Snails' inclusion to the overall story? Would you want to see a wider inclusion of pony themed sports in future episodes? I would like to hear your thoughts on Buckball season. And here's hoping we get even more side characters actually surprising us with how much they can add to a story. I am Dr. Wolf, and I look forward to hearing from you. Wait, hold on a second. What happened to Snail's horn here?
You could do what I do and not think about it.
But how did.
Seriously, I don't think about anything.
I don't understand what could have.
Ever.
Well, okay then.